welcome to this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. We're talking sports, entertainment, and sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. Guys, over the weekend, Indianapolis Colts quarterback Andrew Luck retired from the NFL, citing concerns over his rehabbing from injuries. Taylor, what do you think about Luck retiring, and how does this impact the way that we look at the Colts and the AFC South this year?
I was obviously shocked when I saw it, but looking back, it's not that shocking, I guess, in the end, considering all the injuries he's had over the last, his entire career, really. So good for him. I'm glad he retired and got out while he still has his brain presumably intact. He seems like a guy that has many interests outside of football, so why not pursue them? Obviously, it screws the Colts, though. I had them as my favorite to come out of the AFC South. They looked like the best team in the division last year. After their slow start, they trounced the Texans in the playoffs, as I remember, not very fondly. But obviously, Jacoby Brissett was their starter a couple of years ago when Luck was out. He didn't look good. Players do improve. There's a chance Brissett's gotten better since then, but we just haven't seen any reason to believe that he has improved enough to make the Colts relevant. The one thing that will keep them in the picture is just the lack of one great team in that division. So the division's still winnable. I don't think they'll win it. I think it's either Houston or Jacksonville. Tennessee has a chance, but I'm not super into them either. It takes one division winner out of the mix, I think. So it just kind of turned the whole division upside down, potentially.
Yeah, the Colts are done. I mean, I'll get right to it, Taylor. The Colts are done. They got talent on both sides of the ball, but without Andrew Luck, they're not a team that's going to compete for a playoff spot. There's just too many other teams in all four of the AFC divisions fighting for the wild cards. And then when you get into their division, that division was already going to be competitive. All four teams coming into the season all had a shot of being at least 500. But every team had its own set of question marks. And like we talked about when we previewed the AFC South before a couple weeks ago, if you check the tape, we were talking about how it comes down to Andrew Luck's health. That's pretty much as far as the Colts will go. Well, now there's no Andrew Luck. So if there's no Andrew Luck, there is no chance in hell the Colts make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for Luck for basically putting his family first on it, with basically making the decision. If, he's leaving a lot of money on the table to decide to just not play anymore. So it's good to see him put his health and his family's well-being over, getting a paycheck. Especially if he may have been, like I had seen that if he had maybe just sat out the year, tried to rehab but couldn't get back in, that he still would have been paid millions and millions of dollars to not play. But he got the Colts back that money, basically. So he kind of helped them if he didn't think he was going to be able to play this year anyway. And if he doesn't want to play, he shouldn't play. Yeah, Indianapolis is in a really rough spot because we kind of figured that they were in that, in the mix, but they weren't exactly a clear-cut dominant favorite to win the division, even with Andrew Luck as their quarterback. And now they were trying out, I think the name that came out this morning was that quarterback that hasn't played in a few years, that was really good in college and then didn't really do much in the NFL. Of course, I'm referring to Brandon Weeden. I don't know how many numbers they tried before they landed on his, but yeah, we're at Brandon Weeden territory now for the Indianapolis.
I think they also tried Brock Osweiler. I think I saw that too.
At least he started a game in the NFL in the last few years.
That's one of Drew's favorite quarterbacks.
I probably was higher on him when he was drafted at one point, but
I talked myself into him once upon a time. So
why wouldn't they go try and trade for someone like Ryan Tannehill?
I don't think the Titans would do that just because Marcus Mariota's made out of glass.
Blake Bortles or somebody that used to be a starter that's backing up somewhere now. Who goes and digs for Osweiler and Weeden? How – what they're doing? They're going to throw the season so they can have the number one draft pick next year and take one of the franchise quarterbacks.
That's possible. But if you are in a position where you thought that you're a good quarterback away from making the playoffs and contending, do you really then try to go our quarterback's out. Let's just go the entire opposite direction and see if we can be the worst team in the NFL.
It's hard to, no fan base wants that. But after they start losing games because they're just not good enough at the quarterback position, like Jacoby Brissett, how many games is he going to win himself? Like, this is a quarterback-driven league. Like, we all know that. And they're going to have arguably number 29 or 30 of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL ranked. So I just don't see it happening. I like Andrew Luck. I've been a fan of him since Stanford. I can see both sides, the fans being frustrated and Andrew Luck taking care of his health. But still, like, the team itself, they're in trouble.
I guess any trade situation, the team would know the Colts are desperate, so they could probably just try to force them to overpay. It's like, well, we don't have to trade you Tannehill, but if you want to give us a 3 or something, we'll consider it. But then you're like, the Colts are paying 3 or a 2 or a 4 for a backup quarterback that gets them where? Like 9 wins at most. So they're kind of in a no-win situation.
They're done. Stick a fork in them.
Yeah,
late season.
The best option, I think, for a team like that is to basically either, if you've got a young guy or if you can find a young guy who may have gone undrafted, untested, throw him out there. See what you can do.
They got Chad Kelly. They might throw him in there.
Yeah, he's probably the best option they've got because you might as well see what you have. If the season's not going to go anywhere, see what you've got, and then you can make an informed decision. That would be what I would do. Rich, with the Colts in this position, which AFC teams that we know, Rick, I know what your answer is before I even ask you this question, but I'm just going to tee you up, and let's see you, swing at it here. Which AFC team has the most to gain from the Colts being without Andrew Luck this year, Rick?
Okay, before I go for my homer pick, the obvious pick is one of the AFC South teams. Now they have a better shot at winning the division, either Houston. Like Taylor mentioned, all 3 teams have holes. Houston's defense, it's sad to say, is not going to be as good as it's been in the last several years. Jacksonville's offense has question marks, and Tennessee's offense has question marks. So it's like all 3 of those teams seem like they could be 500 teams or better, but they have enough holes to where you can't just say, well, this team specifically. So the division as a whole has a better shot. Then we go to the wild card positions, which, comes down to Buffalo and maybe Pittsburgh and Buffalo and maybe the Chargers and, I don't know, the Bills. So I happen to believe that the Bills are going to be a wild card contender. And when you knock off a potential playoff team, just, basically they don't even play the season, it opens the doors for other teams to have a better shot at making the playoffs. Why not Buffalo? They're going to have one of the best defenses in the league. They're going to have one of the best running games in the league. They've improved their O-line. As long as Josh Allen doesn't play as bad as Jacoby Brissett, we should be good.
I was about to ask, do you really think the difference between the Buffalo Bills in camp this year and the Indianapolis Colts was, Andrew Luck is literally the only difference between those 2 teams, the team that made the playoffs last year and the Bills as they sat this summer?
Well, yes, because 2 years ago we didn't play. Buffalo made the playoffs, and the Colts didn't make the playoffs. So this year, without Andrew Luck, the Colts won't make the playoffs. The Bills, which had the number 2 defense last year, everybody's predicting to have at least a top 5 defense this year. They've improved depth and talent all across the board. Like, there's no doubt about it. And right now they're undefeated in the preseason, which I don't remember the last time they've ever done that. It's been since the Super Bowl era, which we don't talk about too much because I'm still traumatized and dealing with PTSD.
I grew up a Dolphins fan, and there are a number of times that I remember them going 4-0 in the preseason or 3-1 in the preseason and being just awful in the regular season. There were preseasons where I was saying Ray Lucas, he looks like a guy who could replace Dan Marino. He is having a fantastic preseason. This is our guy. Or Damon Heward did the same thing for 1 year. There was another quarterback whose name I don't even remember at this point, but it was all of them. They all ended up just being like, oh, yeah, no, it was preseason. They were going up against 3rd teams. The teams they were playing were better and therefore didn't have to play their starters.
Well, I'll break it down real quick like this because Taylor mentioned it before. He did an article on the over-under for Buffalo, and I'm pretty sure he said right around 9 wins, 8 or 9 wins for Buffalo. If you look at the schedule, they play 3 bad teams to start the season: the Jets, the Giants, the Bengals. Okay, all 3 of those teams have a chance of finishing last in their divisions, except Miami is going to finish last in the AFC East.
It's a murderer's row.
Exactly. But then they got 2 games against Miami. That's 5 wins already right there. 5. Just 5. Then they got Cleveland, Tennessee. They got Denver, who's not going to be a great team on the road. Like, they've got a lot of winnable games that could put them at that 9-10 mark, which will be the wild card spot.
Did you just count them as beating, like, you put the Browns, the Titans on the same level as playing the Jets and Giants?
No, a little bit. They're a little bit above, but let's be honest here. Tennessee's offense is horrible. Like, they have one of the worst ranked offenses in the league. They'll have a good defense. Buffalo offense will be at least as good as Tennessee, and their defense will be better. They should win that game. Cleveland, that's another story. We'll see. They might just be all hyped this year. Who knows? Mayfield might be a bust. He might regress. Nick Chubb might break his leg.
Taylor, you want to get in here on? And I try.
I'll try to steer the ship back in the direction it was initially headed. I think the teams that benefit most from Andrew Luck retiring are the Patriots, the Chiefs, and potentially like the Chargers. Because I think that just takes one potential Super Bowl team out of the mix. Not that I think the Colts were like a likely bet to get there, but they were at least really good late last season, and there was reason to believe they had improved this offseason. So the fact that they're no longer in the mix just makes the path more clear for a team like New England or Kansas City, especially because the AFC as a whole is not very deep. We're talking about teams like the Bills and Titans making the playoffs potentially, so that's all you need to know, really. Kansas City, New England AFC title game seems like a pretty good bet at this point.
Rick was reacting like you were agreeing with his pick on the Bills playoff team.
I just said we're talking about teams like the Bills, which is kind of an indictment on the Bills in the first place. But if you want to take that as a compliment, I will.
I'm taking it.
That's fine.
Circle those wagons.
Let's stay with the NFL here, but maybe look ahead a little bit because further even than this season. Soccer star Carli Lloyd from the United States women's national team was recently spotted at Philadelphia Eagles, Baltimore Ravens. They had a joint practice, and she was just drilling a field goal from 55 yards out. James Galanis told ESPN that Lloyd sent him screenshots from at least one NFL general manager expressing interest in getting the soccer star to participate in a preseason game. That would be one of tonight's preseason games on the day of recording. Lloyd declined. There is at least some possibility Lloyd might decide to try her foot at the NFL kicking game next season. While we have not found betting odds on this posted online just yet, Taylor, do you think there's any chance that Carli Lloyd becomes the first female player in NFL history in 2020?
I don't think there's a chance. It'd be really cool. There's no reason that a woman can't play football or kick or whatever. If it's her, that'd be great. But I can't really see it happening. She's still playing soccer. She plays professionally here in the U.S., aside from her duties with the American team. I saw Keenan Allen made a point that she can't kick in the NFL because she wouldn't be of use in a blocked kick situation because she couldn't tackle or something, which seems like a pretty terrible point considering most kickers don't exactly become Sean Taylor whenever they're in kick coverage like that. So, I don't see why she couldn't be any worse at shepherding a guy out of bounds or avoiding contact altogether than Sebastian Janikowski, for example. So if she can kick, she can kick. We can see. I don't know if she'll actually do it. It would be a cool story, I think, but I think the odds are pretty slim, at least for 2020.
First of all, Janikowski has 100 pounds on her. So even if he just throws his
and he still avoided contact.
Yeah, well, as he got older, he was trying to preserve his body more. But I've seen kickers run there and just throw themselves out. Like we just had a preseason game last week where the kicker ran down the field and smashed the returner.
But anytime a kicker makes a tackle, kickoff, block kick, or otherwise, it's always a highlight because kickers never get involved in the tackles.
Well, for the most part, but she'd be the smallest player in the league.
It's also really rare. Like, how often do you have a block kick that results in the kicker needing to tackle to get? Like, that happens like once every couple of weeks, maybe in the NFL.
And she's quick enough. She's playing soccer. She's going to have more speed than half the kickers in the NFL.
She's an athlete. She's a stud of a soccer player, but she would be roadkill on a football field. She's the smallest player in the NFL. The smallest player. Like, and then not only that, is she going to kick off also, or is she just going to do field goals? Is she going to do extra points? Is she going to take up a roster spot just for a publicity stunt? Like, 53 spots is precious for every team except for the Colts this year. Maybe she could try out for the Colts. They don't have Vinatieri anymore. Who knows? I'm not saying she can't kick it. It's all fun and games until you squash a female on the AstroTurf. Well, they don't have AstroTurf anymore. Fake turf.
By the way, I mean, punters are also kickers, but if you're going to go with the whole like, oh, well, if she doesn't do kickoffs, is she worth a roster spot? Punters don't always do kickoffs. Some do. I mean, you've got four if you want to say an extra point is different than a field goal. You have 4 responsibilities divided by 2 players on most NFL rosters. You have extra points, you have field goals, you have kickoffs, and you have punts. And there's always 2 players for that. And in many situations, the kicker, who's always going to do both extra points and field goals, may also do kickoffs, leaving the punter to literally just punt. A team that has a punter that can do kickoffs doesn't need a kicker that can do kickoffs because
but that's like 2 teams.
It doesn't have to be. I mean,
I know. The Colts are a perfect team. She can go try out for them this year. They have nothing going for them.
What I'm saying is that if there
both the Dolphins and the Colts,
if there are teams that are willing to have a punter on roster that does literally nothing other than punt, they can have a kicker on roster that can do both extra points and field goals. And the kickers, for all the talk about quarterbacks being the most protected position, if you touch a kicker, like if you fall down and the kicker is in your vicinity and they happen to be tripping anyway, and you may have like made the slightest bit of contact with the bottom of one spike on their cleat, that's a 15-yard penalty. I don't think there's really risk of that. And again, it's if she's going to have to be in a position where she ends up with a block kick and she's got to do coverage, she goes back and she'd be quicker than most kickers. So she'd at the very least be able to corral a player or stand in the way, which is more than most kickers do. 95% of kickers in the NFL on a block kick are either not quick enough to get back to cover that player that is returning it, or don't want to risk an injury and won't get back. So I don't know that she'd be in any.
She's never played football before. She doesn't even know the game. You're putting her out there to get killed.
Yeah, but there are plenty of players that go from just playing youth soccer to playing college football as a kicker and excel dramatically.
But then they go from college to NFL. Send her to college first then.
But
I got an idea. Send her to the XFL. Well, they won't have kicks. Never mind. Send her to Canada.
I mean, all this stuff is beside the point. Like, if she can make field goals, then she can get a job. Like, the tackling stuff is completely irrelevant. Kickers are so bad in the NFL that most teams will go through multiple of them every season, it seems. So it's like –
she has no experience.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady's not the best in her life. Tom Brady's not a great tackler, but he's going to get a roster spot as a quarterback.
Tackling stuff is so irrelevant. Like, if she can kick field goals successfully, she can get a job. That's that's literally it.
Because she'd be a field goal kicker.
Okay. Who's never played football in her life. So she should just surpass everybody who's played college, has kicked in college, and has experience kicking since they were kids, kicking a football in a game.
Yeah.
But based on what? Based on her just doing it with nobody rushing the kick or nothing.
The Detroit Lions, I want to say, signed a kid who had made YouTube videos about kicking excellently. And he was signed to an NFL contract. It's not like he played at Bama or Florida State or some great kicking school. And
where's he at?
I don't remember. It was a 15 minutes of fame kind of thing. He's a kicker. Who talks about a kicker? We talked about it when he was signed. It was something that I remember seeing. I remember going like, oh, isn't that really cool? And then it slipped my mind and I never drafted him because it's a kicker.
How tall is this chick?
I don't think that she's not blocking kicks. She's just lining up and kicking them.
She's 5'7", so she's bigger than Darren Sproles.
She's Wes Welker.
5'7". Is she?
That's what it says.
Sign her up.
That was easy.
Is met Rick's minimum height requirement, which basically I would clear the NFL minimum for height by like a half an inch at this point.
Well, I mean, she's getting up there near Beth Phoenix's size and stature. I mean, let's go.
Great. We're all on board. Let's see that next year. Let's move over to college football. Week 1 began last weekend with what could be referred to as week 0. Florida edged out Miami. Hawaii pulled the upset against Arizona. Make sure to check out Taylor, Jim Baviglia, and my series Power 5 picks for our betting picks for 5 of the biggest games of this coming weekend. Rick, do you see any potential betting upsets on par for on the matchup sheet for this week?
Oh, I had 2 of them in my 2 college picks this week. First of all, if you're picking against Oregon, if you're picking Auburn against Oregon, you're going to lose. Oregon's going to go down there and they're going to win. They're getting 3.5 points. They have more talent on both sides of the ball. The only thing Auburn has the advantage of is their defensive line. And Oregon's returning 5 offensive linemen. 4 of them are projected NFL draft picks. They got 90% of their skilled players back. They got arguably the best quarterback in all of college. People are talking about him being a top draft pick next year, number 1 overall if it's a quarterback needy team. 6'6", he's got a cannon, he can run the ball. And then defensively, they had the number 1 recruit in all of college football last year, starting at defensive end. They got most of the returners back at linebacker, or most of their starters back. They got 17 starters returning. Auburn doesn't even have their starting receivers. They have an average running game. They've lost some of their best players on defense. They're starting a true freshman quarterback. Like, come on now. Come on, man. Oregon's going to upset them, win the game outright. That's pick 1. Pick 2, I think Northwestern's going to go in and beat Stanford on this weekend. They're 6.5-point underdogs. I think at the very least they cover the spread. Stanford has so many holes. They have more holes than Auburn does. They've lost all their skilled players on offense. Their defense was average last year, and they lost their top tacklers for defense in the secondary at least. And then Northwestern, they've got a brutal defense coming back. They're returning most of their starters as well. And they're going to have a better quarterback this year than they had last year, a 5-star recruit that transferred from Clemson. Most of their skilled players are back. They got better offensive linemen this year than last season. And last season, what did they do? They went to the Big Ten title game. They won the Big Ten West. Come on now. Are you telling me they're going to be a near touchdown underdog when they've improved their team and Stanford's regressed? Give me a break. Those are my 2 upsets.
I think that Taylor and I each agree with you on one of those and disagree with you on another one. So, because I think that Taylor, you also picked Northwestern, right?
I have Northwestern covering the spread, so I didn't go as far as Rick as calling a victory, but I have them covering like 6.5, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with you on Oregon. I think that this is as much as a week 1 game can be. This is kind of like a boom or bust game for the entire Pac-12.
Yep.
Because this is, it's Auburn, it's not Bama, it's not Georgia, it's not Florida. If Oregon can't prove that they belong in the conversation with the top 4 teams in the SEC, there's no way that the conference winner can prove at the end of the season that they belong with the top 4 teams in the country, even if they were to go undefeated. It's unfortunate. It's just the way that, a lot of conferences, basically every conference except for the SEC gets looked at, which is that if the traditional powerhouse is not doing well, the conference is just terrible. So I agree with you, though. I think Oregon, it's a neutral site game. I think that they've got a really good chance. Both teams were much worse last year than they should have been. I think that Oregon, if both swing back, I think Oregon swings further. I think that Auburn's swing up wouldn't go quite as much.
Well, the biggest knock on Oregon's always their defense, and last year they won their bowl game 7-6. So, come on now. Auburn's lost most of their skilled players, a true freshman quarterback. Come on. If we just go quarterback versus quarterback, you've got a Heisman Trophy candidate versus a true freshman. Give me a break.
7-6. That sounds like a good old SEC football game. That is some entertaining television. God, that would be if I ever turn on an Oregon game and it ends up being 7-6, I would just be so unbelievably disappointed in having watched that.
Yeah,
you watch Oregon for the offense. But anyway, that will be an interesting game. What was that, Taylor?
And the uniforms.
Yeah. I love that, though, because there was a great article I was looking at on sportslogos.net. They were breaking down all of the uniform changes for the year because there are a billion of them. And I kind of like, because I love logos and uniforms, and maybe we could talk about this in a future week, but I love the fact that Oregon has made it their unique look, their iconic look, is that they never wear the same thing twice. It's in the same way that Bama never changes, Florida State with the gold helmets, Miami with the U on the white. All of those are iconic. And Oregon is iconic because if you go, what team is that? It's Oregon. And I love that. But maybe we do, at one point, we could do like a bracket week or something, maybe in December when we got to, like, when we're waiting for bowl season to get back to going or something. We could do a breakdown like the best college uniforms or something. But anyway, sticking with college football, according to a report from ESPN, Alabama inside linebacker Dylan Moses is likely to miss the entire 2019 season. He suffered a knee injury in practice on Tuesday. He was a finalist for the Butkus Award a year ago. He ranked number 13 on Mel Kiper Jr.'s preseason big board for the upcoming NFL draft for 2020. I can't imagine this is going to change any of our minds about Saturday's game for the Crimson Tide because they're hosting Duke. I don't think that losing the linebacker is going to change our minds on that. But does this injury change the landscape of the SEC at least, and maybe even the college football playoff with this injury, with Alabama maybe being shorthanded for the entire season, Taylor?
I don't really think it does, mostly because it's Alabama and they're just going to replace a 5-star guy with another 5-star guy. Shane Lee is the inside linebacker replacement. He's another top recruit. This guy was 6 feet tall and 215 pounds in 8th grade. So Alabama just keeps churning them out, and their entire roster is filled with the best player or the guys that would be the best player on different teams. So I'm not very worried about it. Maybe if it was Tua, you could have questions about it. But, you know, with all the depth they have at every position, it's impossible to say that one guy can just torpedo their whole season.
Absolutely agree with my esteemed colleague. You know, Alabama has a half dozen players that are projected to go in the first round next year. A half dozen players. And that's just before the season starts. Who knows? It could be even more by the time the season's done. With that said, so they go what, from a top 10 defense to a top 20 defense? Is that really going to make a difference in the SEC or in the playoffs? I mean, yes, he's a stud. He's a great player. He's the quarterback of their defense. But they got so much depth, so many top-level players in every aspect of the defense. There's no way. And even if their defense is not as dominant, that offense is still going to be a juggernaut. They're still going to put up close to 30 points a game easily. You know, and then defensively, so they don't hold people to 2 touchdowns or less. They hold people to 17 points or less. I mean, seriously, it's not going to be a big difference. They're still going to go at worst, 1 loss on the whole year, except for maybe when they get to the playoffs. No, it doesn't change anything except for the kids, you know, health and draft stock. Other than that, it doesn't change anything. Still the best.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll change anything for the regular season. I do think that it makes Clemson a bigger favorite to win the national championship. You know, if we still want to count this as preseason, since we're recording this before the Thursday night games, and we've only seen 2 games in all of FBS to this point last weekend. I think that they're still the best team in the SEC. That doesn't really change my mind. They're still going to win the SEC West. They're still going to, in all likelihood, win the SEC championship game unless something flukish happens. They're still going to make the college football playoff, maybe at 12-1, maybe at 13-0. But yeah, that would be where the first time I would think that this injury might come into play would be matching up against Clemson when they're actually in that, 2 games to win the national championship, and they're playing the best of the best in the country. And also whichever second SEC team gets in there. Bam! Had to get a little shot in. Let's talk about some tennis. U.S. Open got underway this week in New York. Novak Djokovic won the men's title last year. Naomi Osaka won the women's championship in 2018. So, Rick, who's impressed you so far in the 2019 tournament? Because I know that we've got about a round or so down as we're sitting here.
Right now, nobody's really been impressive. A lot of the favorites have been tested in their first round. And even today, Serena Williams was tested. She lost the first set in her second round match. Naomi Osaka lost the first set in her first round match. Federer's lost the first set in both of his matches. It's like they're getting slow to get started. And then these qualifiers / 150th ranked tennis player in the world is putting up some kind of contest. Venus Williams got swept. And Serena was playing a 17-year-old who hasn't won. I don't even know the last time she's won a tennis tournament. So it's like what's been impressive is the inconsistency of the higher ranked players right now. The lower ranked players are bringing it. And that's also what makes this tournament exciting because especially on the women's side, it is wide open.
Well, Taylor, I guess my question for you is when you're looking at the men's side of this tournament, Djokovic, again, the reigning champion, who do you think has the best chance of winning on the men's side of things?
I mean, you kind of have to say it's Djokovic, just kind of by default. He's the best player in the world right now, but he does have a tougher draw than Nadal does. So that kind of clearer path to the final does make me kind of like the value on Nadal. Nadal's obviously always an injury risk, more so than some of the other contenders, but Djokovic has to get through Medvedev today. I believe they play today, and then Federer is also on the same side of that bracket. So it's not an easy path to the final, but he is the best player in the world. He is resilient. We saw him, win that marathon against Federer at Wimbledon. So if I had to bet on it, I would say Djokovic is probably the safest bet, but I think Nadal, thanks to his kind of less difficult path, also makes for a viable value.
Yeah, I mean, those were the two, odds-on favorites to win the tournament. The jokester, Djokovic, he does play Medvedev and Federer on his side of the draw, which is a lot tougher than what Nadal. Nadal was going to end up, I believe, playing Dominic Thiem, who lost already. He got upset in the first round. So it's like one of the top contenders on that side is already gone, and there wasn't much else after that. So really it comes down to Nadal's health. If he can get through the tournament, get to the semifinals, continue to play at his high level without any injuries, get to the finals. But it's all Djokovic. Like, by the time he gets to the finals, he might be a little more tired. He might be more battle tested. You don't know, but he's the best player in the world. He's going to be able to get through these challenges. Medvedev is going to be an interesting game because he's already beaten Djokovic, and he took him to 4 sets in the Australian Open earlier this year. So he just won the tournament in Cincinnati, which is the lead-in to the U.S. Open. So it's like he has a lot going for him, a lot of momentum. And so-called pundits believe he's the only one outside of the big three that has a shot at winning this tournament. But you have to go with Djokovic. No doubt about it. He's the best. He's closing in on Nadal and Federer for all-time Grand Slams. Like, the big three have won, 11 straight Grand Slams, I think it was. There's no reason why this won't be the 12th. But as clear as it is on the men's side, the women's side, you can literally put a dozen names up on the board, throw a dart, and you have just as good of a chance of sitting there and picking, whoever you want to pick. And I know a lot of people automatically go right away, I'm taking Serena Williams. Give me Serena. Serena hasn't won a U.S. Open since 2014. She hasn't won a Grand Slam since January 2017. She's not 100% healthy. She's not playing to her top level. She has a tough draw. And first of all, she's in the fourth quarter with the number 2 ranked player in the world, Ashley Barty. I don't even think she's going to get out of her quarter of the draw. I had Barty coming out of there and taking on Simona Halep not Simona Halep. Halep and Kiki Bertens in the top half, Madison Keys and Ashley Barty in the bottom half. And I actually am picking Madison Keys to win the whole tournament. She's been playing the best over the summer. She just won in Cincinnati. She is flying up the ranks. A lot of people are picking her as a trendy pick to win this, and also because it is just so wide open right now. You can't say one or the other is clearly better. You go with the person that's playing consistently the best, and if you do that, it's Madison Keys, who, by the way, this would be her first Grand Slam, so she's got that hunger also going for her.
Taylor, do you see the women's side going the same way, or are you going to do an impression of Rick's impression of someone picking Serena Williams?
Serena.
I won't do that impression. I wouldn't have guessed that's what that person would have sounded like, but it does. Serena's always a tempting bet just by default because she's Serena, but I think Rick made a pretty good argument against her. The women's side of the field is pretty, wide open. There's no clear-cut favorite. I would still take Serena against the field if I had to pick one individual to pick against the field, of course. But I'm not overly confident in that. I feel like the men's side is just more predictable. And if I were betting on it, that's probably where I'd stick with the men probably.
Yeah, and to hammer home that point, there's been 3 different women's Grand Slam winners this year already. This most likely be the 4th. And I think of the 18 major tournaments played, it's at least 17 or even all 18 different winners in the major tournaments, not the smaller ones. It's just crazy, the parity in the women's side of tennis right now. And you can't trust Osaka to repeat. She almost lost in the first round already. She was knocked out of the first round in Wimbledon. She didn't do anything in the French Open either. She hasn't looked good since early in January when she was at the Australian Open. You look at every top-ranked woman coming in, every one of them has some kind of flaw or concern. The only one that coming in right now that doesn't have a flaw is Madison Keys, except for the fact she has not won a Grand Slam yet. This could be her first one. If you're going to pick someone as a first-time winner, you have to go with her.
Let's shift over to MMA. UFC's in Shenzhen, China this weekend. UFC Fight Night fight card begins at 6 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday. Just keep that in mind. Even though it's Fight Night, it'll be fight morning, or if you're on the West Coast in the Pacific time zone, 3 a.m. on Saturday morning. So that's basically stay up for that one. And then just watch some college football all day. Anyway, main event promises to be an historic one for this one. Jessica Andrade defending her women's strawweight championship against Weili Zhang. It's the first UFC title to be defended in China. Zhang, the first Chinese fighter to ever challenge for a UFC belt. The champ, a minus 185 favorite. The challenger coming in at plus 150. Rick, who leaves Shenzhen with the gold on early Saturday?
Yeah, I'm dreading staying up to 3 in the morning watching this, but
that's when it starts.
Well, the main card, yeah, that's when the main card starts. The prelims start at midnight our time, so we get a little bit of action before we pass out. Even before we get into the main event, the whole main card has some great fights lined up. This is actually what I feel. Everybody's looking ahead to UFC 242 next week with Khabib coming back and stuff and that loaded card. But this has got some intriguing fights, some international prospects and contenders in their divisions. Like, this is a card not to sleep on. With that said, I'm going with the challenger here. I like good stories. I like inspirational stories. I like, a story where we get that happy ending. I want to see history made here. I believe she has the skills to do this. Not only does she have the ground and pound game, but she also has striking skills to compete with the champ. The champ has a lot of pressure. She puts that pressure on. You saw her do it in her last fight where she just beat Rose Nama, whatever you want to say, Namajunas. She just defeated her in May to win the title, and she slammed her and knocked her out and slammed her on her head. She's not going to do that against Zhang this fight. Zhang's got some kicking. She's got some punching. She's very competent on the ground. She's won 19 straight fights. She's going to have the entire 5 billion Chinese people rooting for her. History on her side. Why not root for something like that? She's got the skills. Why not root for that kind of historical finish? I'm going with her to win. I like her as a fighter anyways. If Jessica can do this in Brazil, her home country, to win the title, why can't Zhang do this in her home country?
I don't know if Zhang's really dealt with the power or the volume with Andrade will be able to land the punches. The volume of the punches she'll be able to land. Very easy for me to say. The competition hasn't been great against her. I do think the home field advantage is something that could play into it a little bit, but I have a hard time picking against, I guess, Andrade, I think.
It's Andrade.
Andrade. So the betting value is obviously with Zhang. Rick made a pretty good case for it at plus 165, but I would side with Andrade, but the value is not really there, so I'd probably just avoid betting on it altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I like the champ in this one. I think that when she won the title in Brazil, she did not have her best performance in that match, and she was still able to pick up a win. I was actually just watching it back like an hour ago before we jumped in here to record, and because it was a second round knockout, and it was, I mean, the knockout itself was incredible because she basically just, while being put in a headlock, deadlifted her opponent and slammed her down and basically went head first and knocked her out. And up until that point, though, I don't know that she was winning the fight. And if that was her on an off night, if she's having a good showing in Shenzhen, I don't know that Zhang is going to be able to stop her. On top of that, too, is that, as Rick pointed out, yeah, Andrade won in her home country, but she didn't have the best performance. She ended up winning via knockout after losing the fight for much of the first, round and a half until the knockout happened. So I don't know if that's really the best comparison to go with, because it wasn't like it was a build-up to a win. It was all right, she's down 1-0. Oh, she might be on the way to losing this round. Oh, she won. That was how that fight went. So I don't know if that's the best comparison to really draw, because it was almost as if there was that pressure of fighting in front of her home country or in her home country. So I don't know. I would pick the champion. I agree with Taylor's point. I don't know that there's betting value on betting on the champion at -185. UFC, MMA is just one of those types of sports where, like in Andrade's fight when she won the championship, it can literally change at a moment's notice, and the bet that you place that looked completely great for the first 3/4 of a match could end up just being flushed down the toilet because of a weird slam or a punch or a slip. So -185 might be a little bit rich for me to be willing to really wager on it, but I would pick Andrade to win this fight. Let's move on to NASCAR. NASCAR heads to Darlington this weekend, an annual Labor Day tradition, according to Rick. Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson enter the weekend as the betting favorites to take the checkered flag, each with +500 betting odds. Also among the favorites for this weekend, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., each of whom has +600 odds to win. Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano each come in at +700. They're the only other drivers with odds below the +1,000 mark. So, Taylor, let's go to you first. Who do you think picks up the win?
Denny Hamlin did me well a couple weeks ago at Bristol, picking up the win there. I like him again at +600. Why go away from a good thing? If you want something of a sleeper, I kind of like Eric Jones. He's at +1,200. He finished 5th at this event last year. Not exactly a household name, but if you want kind of a punt option, I like that for +1,200.
Yeah, I have Jones as a value play this week, Chase Elliott, and then Jimmy Johnson, because Johnson's won, more times at Darlington out of active drivers. But for this race, this is, 60+ years they've been running it on Labor Day weekend. It is one of the most cherished races in NASCAR, one of the top 4. Like if you had a Grand Slam, this would be one of them. So with that tradition coming in, that's why they always do their throwback, to past paint schemes, past champions and stuff, because of the history of this. So there's a handful of drivers that have a shot at winning this. Truex, Hamlin, Harvick, Keselowski, Logano, like they've all won at Darlington before. So in all honesty, nobody has like the clear-cut favorite here or advantage at this track, which is going to make this race even more exciting, which for us NASCAR fans is a good thing. With that said, Kyle Busch hasn't won in 3 months. He hasn't won since Pocono back in June 2nd. So that's about 3 months once this race comes. Keselowski hasn't won since a race prior to that. I believe those two drivers, Harvick's won a couple times, Hamlin's won a couple times, Truex has won, Logano's won. Like all these other stars and top favorites have won since then. I think it's time for either Keselowski or Kyle Busch to get a win. The playoffs start, and there's 2 races left if you include this one until the postseason starts. I think this is time where Kyle Busch and Keselowski, like last year, Keselowski won like 3 straight races heading into the playoffs and had a lot of momentum going. This is a time where the top stars have to turn it on, get the momentum going, just like NFL or any other sport. You start playing your best, you put your best foot forward. That's why I'm going with Kyle Busch. I think he's going to turn it up this week. It's been 3 months. This is a very traditional race. He's only won 1 time at Darlington in his past, and it was many years ago. I'm taking Rowdy to win on Sunday night and send all the NASCAR fans home happy.
Can I get a NASCAR woo?
Woo!
There we go. Well, Rick came across what may just be the absolute worst boxer in the world recently. We just had to talk about it. His name is His name is Ibrar Reyes. He fights out of the UK. He's got a record of 0-13-0 since March of this year. In his career, he's 166-4, and that includes having won 3 of his first 8 career fights. He's been fighting since September of 2008, which is a long time, and it means that he averages about 16 fights a year, which is more than one a month. Scheduled to fight again in early October, which is insane. His 14th fight, and that's from March to October. Rick, is this admirable that this guy seems to fight every 3 or 4 weeks, even though he loses all the time? Or is this just irresponsible of the organizers to keep on booking him?
You can make an argument for both. I'm going to choose to say he's a hero. Okay, this man is a hero. This man isn't quitting like Andrew Luck. This man continues to go out there. He's a punching bag with legs, and he continues to fight. Even when he gets knocked down, he gets back up. He never stops. This is a story for generations to come to be inspired. It doesn't matter how many times you lose, how many times you get knocked down. It matters how many times you get back up. He's got back up, 166 times? This will be 167th time. Like, this man is a national treasure for his country. I don't even remember where you said he was from.
Okay.
The UK. He's a UK treasure. He's a hero. He should be up on Mount Rushmore if they had a Mount Rushmore in the UK. I don't know what else to say about this guy other than I am absolutely amazed that he continues to fight and he's not, in a coma somewhere, because we know how dangerous the sport of boxing can be. And the fact that he's fought this many times, this many rounds, and has taken this many punches, he's a superhero. He's the biggest loser of superheroes, but he's a superhero. He's an inspiration. And I'm going to tell my grandkids and my great grandkids and generations to come.
Taylor, I mean, what do you think? Because, I mean, the dude has fought 176 times, soon to be 177 in 11 years. I mean, that's...
Yeah. It's kind of like, you know how the Buffalo Bills losing all the Super Bowls was kind of still impressive because they still got to the Super Bowls? It's like, this guy never wins when he gets there, but it's still kind of impressive that he is there so often. So it's kind of like that. And that was definitely meant as a shot at the Buffalo Bills. So let's note that. But it is impressive. It is pretty good stamina, I guess. I don't know why his nickname is Smokin', but apparently that's his nickname. So it's cool. Interesting story.
They gave him the nickname because every time that when they found him for his first fight, it was like, oh, what was he doing? Oh, he was just smoking. It's like, all right.
He smokes between rounds.
Yeah, it is an interesting story. It's too bad that he's. I don't know. Maybe he'll win next time. There's always next time.
He's been saying that for 100 and something fights.
He'll be fighting for a title.
I think I looked. I think he actually held a title at one point.
Oh my god!
No, I'm not kidding. Like in that early run, like he was like a fill-in or something. It's hard to tell because for the most part, all of these fights are basically in what amounts to like small civic centers that are attached to hotels. It's or a big like a hotel ballroom that happens to have like ramped seating.
He gets paid in a free comps. That's
it's admirable that this guy's basically found a way to make boxing a day job, just doing it like every 3 or 4 weeks. But I mean, at a point, there's got to be some kind of health issue to come out of this. It's when you're getting the amazing thing is that for 166 losses, he hasn't been knocked out or TKO'd or even stoppage. Like he's survived the 3, 5, 12 rounds, whatever they've had for those fights, because not all of them have been extended fights. A lot of them are shorter 3 to 5 round fights. But he's survived most of them. like 100, I think only like 3, 4, something like that of his, it's an insanely low number, less than 5% of his losses have come by stoppage, which is baffling. I mean, for organizers to keep on booking him though, like it reminds me of, I don't know if you guys saw the movie because it's like 20 years old at this point, the movie Not Another Teen Movie, where they basically mocked all of the movies geared towards teens from the 90s. And there was a character who was like a lineman on the football team. And they, on the scoreboard, were counting down how many concussions he had left to suffer before it was basically like lethal. And during it, it was, yeah, I mean, obviously a different time when you're talking about concussions in a lighthearted way versus now. But every time that he'd get hit in the head with a football or knocked unconscious or kicked by a bull or something, the scoreboard would just tick down one. This guy has lost 166 boxing matches. And in the 10 boxing matches that he's won, it's not like he's gone out there and like the other guy just forfeited, or the 6 that he won and the 4 that were no contest. This dude has to have been hit in the head, what, on conservatively speaking, 5,000 times? 10,000 times? Is it too conservative to say that he gets 50 headshots per fight if it's 3 to 7 rounds? I mean, at some point, like, there's got to be a health hazard with this. I mean, if the dude's healthy, this guy is a superhero. He's Bruce Willis and Unbreakable. But if there is, like, I just hope they're doing their due diligence. I hope that they are, because it is such a small, thing, and it's kind of one of those things where it does remind me a bit of like Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, and the reality behind that movie of seeing, professional wrestlers that, I mean, I've seen guys, man, I don't remember. I saw the Barber fight like 5 years ago at a middle school gym in Coral Springs, Florida.
It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer just stands there and takes all the punches and stuff until the other fighter tires himself out, so Homer wins by default. That's pretty much what this is, except without the winning.
This guy is Homer Simpson without the winning.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think that'll do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Make sure to check out gamblingsites.org for more from these guys right here. Also, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check back next week for another edition of the podcast on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. They've been Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. I'm Drew Goldfarb. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.